what would it be like to have this kind of painting session with just our friends that are non-painters? One of our friends painted a very special miniature that they named after David Hasselhoff with a nice red Speedo.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Hobby Hangout with Asu and Dave. I'm Asu. Here's Dave.
Dave.
So I was thinking about how in one of the earlier episodes actually you mentioned how you used to paint by yourself and you wanted to make it more of a family activity. And so, I started painting with you here and then, but then the kids really got into it as well with you. And recently, you invited our friends who, as far as we know, have never painted a miniature before, correct?
Yeah.
Tell me everything about it.
Yeah, so I think first is sort of your initial comment how hobbying or painting in this hobby is typically a very isolating activity. And I know that it's talked about here and there in like Reddit channels, and there's YouTube videos and things like that about how, although it's enjoyable from almost like a relaxing perspective, and I guess in some cases maybe mental health, just a way to de-stress, the activity in of itself is typically very isolating. You typically do it on your own. You're painting your armies on your own. So there isn't often a lot of opportunities to paint with other people. And then obviously it requires some level of coordination to do with a lot of people, because wherever you're going, you need to have the right materials and the equipment available so that other people can paint, and lighting and brushes and everything like that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not the easiest thing to do in a large group, but it's definitely something that I've always been interested in doing. I know I've kind of dabbled in just sort of doing, not even tutorials, just sort of painting sessions in the past.
At the hobby store, right?
Yes, yeah. So I wanted to try it with friends, and I know our group of friends have mentioned here and there about interest in painting some of their board game miniatures after they saw us, like when we finished painting the Zombicide.
I heard something different. I thought they were interested in maybe us painting it for them.
No. But there's that difference of painting miniatures with people that paint miniatures regularly, right? And they're going to have their own projects that they're working on. So even if you paint together, everybody's painting something very different typically, and sort of focused on their individual projects or their individual models. In this case, what I kind of thought was, what would it be like to have this kind of painting session with just our friends that are non-painters, that don't have experience in painting. So a couple of weeks ago, I organized the first session. We had a bit of a very light tutorial, I guess I'd say. I know I didn't explain everything that we were trying to do around wet blending, but I didn't want to be too prescriptive. But I know feedback, just talking with you after the event, I think obviously I went too little on the instruction in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. But overall, I think everyone still had fun. And I know one of our friends painted a very special miniature that they named after David Hasselhoff with a nice red Speedo. So I'll be sure to share pictures of that after the fact. And we continued from there, right? So everyone enjoyed that event. I know there were some questions on when we would continue painting, because I had brought extra miniatures, but we kind of transitioned into the Goblin Quest game. So then when I had invited them for the next game night, I had also messaged, if anyone would be interested in painting again. So I know I got a couple of thumbs up, so I organized the paint or the figures. This time I brought in a couple of different figures, and I brought up different paints, and we set it up in our dining room. I know we don't have the greatest light there for painting.
It was not.
I don't think the light's bad, but it's not specifically for painting.
Well, it was okay when we still have the natural light coming from outside. Once it started getting dark and we only had the room light, because we have like that yellowish light, it didn't feel like it was very helpful.
No, but it wasn't horrible. But overall, I think I took a slightly different approach. So to the original sort of evaluation, I just went over what we were trying to accomplish with the wet blending, So I showed them on one
So
miniature.
wet blending was just because, so you didn't explain the blending aspect, and some people that are listening to this might not know what wet blending is, right? So it's basically just a technique so that there's a blend between the three different tones of paint, right? And what ended up happening when you didn't explain it is that some of us ended up having like very
distinct
lines between all of the different colors that we used.
Yes, yeah. So rather than going sort of from that transition of bright yellow to red, the initial one was sort of that banding of bright yellow, darker yellow, orange, and then red. So in this case, yeah, I kind of showed them with one miniature and going through those colors, how I was wet blending it from one tone to the other and covering less and less, but highlighting how that transition would occur. And I think that definitely helped. Again, not that the first models were bad or anything like that. They still showed, I think, good coloring, especially with the dry brushing. But the second models, I think, were really well done, especially this being sort of like the second time everyone painting. I think we all accomplished a very consistent level of lava monsters, and they all looked really great. We'll share pictures of those as well. And then from there, I wanted to introduce them because again,
we graduated.
Yes, we graduated. Everyone graduated. So I figured, the initial creatures were these lava monsters where we were transitioning from yellow to red and then sort of just dry brushing the dark black on all the raised rock areas. So overall, obviously not too complex. There's no many like little details and things that you have to
no
pick
eyes.
out. Yeah, no eyes, no things like that. So I did want to give everybody the opportunity to paint something different, right? So I had primed some goblins and some orcs from Arcadia Quest, which, although they have more details, they're also, chunkier models, especially compared to something that's like, a 28 or 32 millimeter scale figure that's very thin, very small. These guys...
It didn't have a lot of details either. Like,
No,
there's
not
always
a ton,
like buckles
yeah.
and stuff like that. It didn't have that many.
But they had nice, large surface, big features too, right? So yeah, we got everybody to pick those out, and I introduced them to speed paints. So again, I'm not a huge fan of speed paints in everyday painting for myself, but I do see them as useful, especially introducing people to miniature painting, because it does make it faster, and it does allow you to sort of get those different tones versus just using a flat acrylic paint where you would have to either use washes or inks and highlights to get those different tones and create the volumes on the model. So yeah, the speed paint it doesn't do it perfectly, but it does give you a little bit more of that contrast, I guess, right? So yeah, we broke those out. I pulled out all the speed paints that I have, so everyone got to pick out their colors and work
I
with
think that they had fun doing that.
Yeah.
Because you have so many.
Yes, and it allowed everybody to sort of be unique in what they wanted their figure to look like, right? So we had a purple goblin, a kind of olive green goblin from yours, right? And you guys went with like silver hair. We had more of like a skin-toned orc, and then a darker orc and a lighter orc. So everybody went.
And then there was
the
muscle color, like that transition of like, I don't know, what would you call it? To me, it still looks like it's from a human going into a zombie, kind of like flesh.
It's just a flesh tone.
Fleshy.
Yeah, it's just a flesh tone.
With
orc.
blood.
But yeah, everyone seemed to have fun, and they even had that rite of passage of spilling paint.
Twice.
Yes, anyone who's painted miniature paints for a while knows that you have to spill paint at some point. It's going to happen, and being speed paints with the dropper bottles, one was, I think, the ball bearing may have plugged the hole, and they just kept squeezing, so the top flew off, and it just poured paint everywhere.
That's how we ended up with a lot of silver everywhere.
A lot of silver paint. Everyone had to grab and use silver on their models. And another one was the red one, right? Which is very dying. Like it just, our one friend's hand was all red.
Yeah,
touching
like out of a horror movie.
Yeah. But overall, everyone had fun. And I know there was the comment of when are we going to paint their their figures on
Their zombie side,
their zombie
probably.
side,
Yeah.
and I commented on their one game, Abominable, I think it is. It's that sea one with the sea monsters. So I think that one would be fairly easy to paint the sea monsters with like a turquoise to white, and make all the little features pop very quickly on those figures, I think. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy it, and I mean, we tried to make it social as well, right? So we had our wine. I think you pulled out the chips as well, right?
No, that was
That was
later.
after.
You can't
Yeah.
do painting and chips when you're a beginner.
That's true. But I guess from your perspective, what did you feel or experience while we were doing that? The painting session, to put you on the spot.
Well, I don't know, because this is not my first time, right? It's just
No, but from the experience, did you feel any difference painting in a group and the discussions that were going on and the questions happening?
I think, yeah, I mean, because then I think it's fun to see what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And especially when you're not doing the same thing, like where everyone is picking their own colors, because then you get ideas of what to do with your own, or having people spill paint and make the decision of what colors to use. So that I definitely enjoyed. I think we're a little bit too quiet for so long, and I just can't do that. I can be just like heads down, focused on that, unless it's work. So at some point I was just like, just waiting until everyone was done. But yeah, it was fun. I think it's definitely, like, I wouldn't paint on myself because it's just too isolating. And doing it with them was pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah, then, I mean, that's, to me anyways, the purpose of social painting is not to just focus on your one painting, right? Ideally, we're talking while we're doing that. But to your point, I know this was the first time, so I think we were all very focused on, or they were all very focused on what they were doing and trying not to make, I guess, a mess of what they were trying to paint.
Well, it's just like yesterday when we were painting, right? Like there were certain parts that were a little bit too difficult for me where I wasn't even breathing. So like you wouldn't be able to have a conversation, right? And still be able to concentrate on what you're doing.
Yeah. And for me, like, from having painted for so many years, it is still, like, I guess, refreshing, or like it reinvigorates me when I paint with newer painters, because there's so many things that they're experiencing or learning for the first time that just reminds me of what I can be applying or things that I can bring to my own painting. So like
The color.
one of the things, yeah, that I had mentioned to you is, from a newer painter, you don't have the baggage of years of painting orcs green. So when you get your orc, you've got a clean palette, and you choose any color that you want to paint it, right? Where having painted goblins or orcs for so many years, a specific color, that's almost my go-to, right? If I'm gonna grab a green, and I wouldn't even consider other colors. So just that aspect of a new painter coming into things with sort of a clean palette and making color choices that are completely different from anything I would have thought of, and taking inspiration from that.
And also not worrying about whether the colors match or not,
exactly,
right?
right? Because I think the more you get into painting and trying to elevate your painting, you start looking at like triads and color theory and whether certain colors match. And like at the end of the day, from an artistic perspective, those rules aren't there to be like strictly followed, right? It's there for you to understand it, and then once you understand it, you should be looking how you can break it and make colors that aren't part of a triad, or things like that. How do you make them work, even if they're not complementary colors? But sort of just brushing all that aside from a new painter's perspective, you're just not bogged down with any of that, because you don't know any of that, or you don't think of any of that, right? You're just expressing yourself through the colors on the miniature, so it's a very freeing form, right? And then also just seeing how they interact with the paints, and like when they made mistakes. I know one of our friends was concerned, oh, I got paint everywhere. I was like, oh, you just grab some water and start brushing it. Start brushing it with water and just seeing that. I don't want to say but they were like, oh wow, this really worked. It just came right off and I can repaint it, right? Just reminding yourself that it's okay to make mistakes, right? You can always coat it with new paint or try and clean it off and then just start from scratch and keep going. It's always a good reminder when you see that being played out in front of you with someone else's figures.
Mm-hmm. Now I will say, and shout out to our group of friends.
Yes, yeah.
Because they like to try, like they're open to trying new things, right?
Yes, yeah.
Whereas I know that not everyone is gonna be like that, right? Like for example, myself, I'm very specific on what I like, and if there's something that I don't like, sometimes I just say no, thank you, without even trying it, right? And so they were really, they were like, yeah, okay, let's try it out, and so it worked out, and that's great. But I think that just having that mindset of wanting to try it from the very beginning, I think that that's what gave them a good experience. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much you have tried to make it easy for them, it might not have worked, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows, maybe in the future when we get certain games, like that could be a quick way for us to actually paint full games, right? If there's 6 or 7 of us painting 1 or 2 models, that's 14 models in one night, right? And you can do that in like less than an hour. Again, not that we're going to turn them into a painting factory there.
That's how it felt like the last time, because all of the models were yours.
Yeah, I know. But that's the other thing I was thinking of is, if I do look to organize one in the future, again, not anytime soon, but in the future, I think I'd like to do something where they can keep what they painted, right? Not just painting from our backlog.
Or they can bring their own miniatures because they have, they have their own games as well and their miniatures. Like I know that one of our friends that has the Zombicide, he has a bunch of expansions, right?
Yes.
So, like maybe one of these days we'll just go and paint all of theirs.
So to me, I did enjoy the social painting session, I would call it. I know that's technically our first time doing that, aside from just like us and our kids. So just holding that as a social group with friends, I did enjoy. I would like to probably do that again in the future. I know I had other friends previously asking about painting miniatures and teaching that, but it just never worked out when we were trying to coordinate it. So it would be fun to continue to do that.
Yeah, and it makes me think of there's these events where it's like, I don't know what it's called, but like paint and wine or something like that, where where they teach you to do a drawing and you have your wine or whatever drink, right? And that has never sounded interesting because I'm so bad at painting. Like anything that is freehand, I'm just not good at it. And with the miniature, like I said, right, like you said, sorry, it's very easy to correct. But then at the same time, it's like you actually have a very definite looking model, right? Like you know where all of the features are. If you want to add anything extra, then that's fine, but you don't have to, and it's already given to you. And everything is just about painting, right? And just finding the spots. So to me, it seems more friendly than if I were to go and do a drawing that I'm just definitely gonna mess up.
Yeah, I can see that. But again, like something like that where you're almost teaching that, right? Where it's a wine and painting and you're teaching certain things that you would be painting, or are you seeing that more like a wine and free form? Paint whatever you want,
the ones, no, because they usually give you, right, like very clear instructions of what the drawing is. Yeah, and like it doesn't matter if I have instructions. We have seen, like, when we watch on YouTube the how to draw something, and I just never get it right. So it's a lot harder for me when it involves drawing than when I already have something that looks right already, right? It's just about painting it.
Yeah.
Because the other things that you're drawing, you're probably going to have to paint them as well. So it just removes one of the hardest step for me.
What would be cool is if we were to design each of our friends as their own miniature.
That would be cool.
And then have a painting session where you paint yourself
as
a mini.
Yeah.
Then you get to take it home.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I've taken away from that experience is it was enjoyable. Maybe we, as you said, maybe we weren't talking quite as much, but I do think we were talking, especially by near the end of it. We were definitely talking a little bit more and sort of discussing what we were picking and what colors we might help, especially when we were looking for colors and trying to find darker or brighter colors and what the options might be. And yeah, I think I'll look forward to scheduling our next painting event. And I know from our family perspective, our kids are asking about doing a terrain project, I think, this weekend. So to start teaching them that. And I think we'll probably start off maybe with some like placeable terrain versus the full table. Although I do have the tables ready to start being shaped, but I figured maybe I'll start with some independent pieces first, like hills and things like that, and get them used to that first. But it should be fun.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll keep you posted. Or actually,
Well, I guess, yeah, if you haven't had a social paint night,
yeah.
I think you should give it a try, especially if you're if painting is your hobby and you have paints and brushes. Technically, you don't need a lot, right? Like you said, I think you like to paint with just the number 2. And I think most of our friends painted with just one size brush. So yeah, you don't need a ton of brushes.
And by the way, like you finally let me use your fancy brushes.
Yes.
But my feedback is that I don't feel the difference between your fancy brushes and like the tube ones. So you probably don't even need to have the fancy brushes out either.
Absolutely not. Yeah. So yeah, give it a try. It's not too big of a hurdle. As you said, natural light is better than light typically. So coordinate it during the day, sit near windows, get outside if the weather's nice, and yeah, paint together. It's a fun experience. It's not so lonely.
The other thing too is that I think, well, from my perspective, having models that are primed white to start is better than the black ones, because when it's primed black, it's so dark that sometimes you just can't see the features. And I feel like the white one is easier.
It is, yeah. I think for defining the features, it is. It's just, I know I like white priming now, but I know white priming is also less forgiving when you miss shadow parts, because then the shadows that should be dark are actually white, and then it doesn't look good. Whereas if it's a black model and you miss a shadowed part, it's black anyways, right? So it doesn't stand out as much. But yeah, overall, I do prefer white as well. But
well, if you're starting out,
everyone
I don't
likes
think that it
different
matters
ones.
if there's
whatever primer you
spot.
can get. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for when we release the video showcasing all of our friends' miniatures.
Yeah, and always take those opportunities to share your hobby with others, right? Build that social aspect and have fun.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Until the next time.
Bye.
Bye.